There's a no screaming policy?
It was either ban screaming or recycling. And what can I say? The holidays won me over.
It's October.
Well, I don't know if I can handle not screaming. Halloween's almost here. Ghoul output's on the rise.
Oh what? You're scared? Cause I got news for you, buddy. Fear's a concept made up by Hallmark, and once you accept that, you won't be pissing your pants out of fear. You'll be pissing your pants because your body's shutting down, unfortunately.
You really mean it?
Not just mean, angry. My recommendation to you is to desensitize yourself to scary bullshit. Find something real f***ed up and stare at it for an hour straight. That cured me.
Of what?
Sanity.
What should I use to numb myself to fear?
I got Scary Movie 2, 5, 2, or fentanyl.
Man, I don't know. I used to beg, plead on Halloween to get the shit scared out of me. But now...
There's no shit to scare out anymore. You're running on fumes.
Exactly! I'm scared to get scared, and I think the best way to conquer my fear of fear is to understand terror at its core. And what better way to do that than go through the history of horror video games? And where better to start than the very first one ever released?
Son of a bitch, you just curdled my blood.
This is racking my nerves!
Tingled my spine.
I'm fucking scared.
Oh, I'm mortified.
What's your favorite genre of game? Platformers, RPGs, fighting games, puzzles? Horror games are an interesting bunch. I mean, what classifies one as such? I mean, what's scary is subjective. This right here is my personal hell, so how does this not count? Well, horror as a genre is designed to spook and scare. That's its goal. Doesn't matter if it succeeds, it matters if that was its intention. Much like how something is considered a comedy when its objective is to make you laugh. So just because I fucking lose at a Scary Movie 2, doesn't make it a comedy. So it doesn't matter how much I piss myself to this, it ain't a horror game. This is.
Oh my god! The color green!
Early examples of horror games were more so horror-themed. Take, for example, Haunted House on the Magnavox Odyssey, the very first home video game console ever, can you tell? The Odyssey was basically 2 blocks on a screen. That's it, which is more than enough to scare today's youth. Each game would change up the block's properties a bit and come alongside a unique overlay for your TV. So, in Haunted House, one player needs to collect every clue before the other player catches them as the ghost. Honestly, the Odyssey's Guess the State game is scarier.
What the hell is Alaska doing there?
But hey, don't let Haunted House dictate what horror games can be, because over on the Atari 2600, we got, now we have graphics. Finally, now I can see not seeing anything. It's pitch dark. Can't see anything but your own eyes, which you gotta admit, that is a creative use of the Atari's limited hardware to convey the feeling of walking through a spooky dark mansion. But fundamentally, this plays the same as another Atari game, Adventure, but now there's bats. You can definitely make an argument that Haunted House is a horror game. You can also make an argument that it's sexy. No matter your stance, you can't deny it laid some important groundwork here. I mean, traversing through the darkness, illuminating your path, restrictive use of items making things more tense. There are huge elements of the horror game genre here. Problem is, it looks like this. A handful of horror movies received Atari 2600 games, but I'm not sure how much these count as horror games. Like Halloween features you trying to escape the serial killer Michael Myers. That's pretty spooky. But all the gameplay boils down to is, get the collectibles, avoid the enemy. It's practically fucking Pac-Man, and that at least has ghosts. Most early examples of horror in gaming boil down to, if Dracula's in it, like none of this is really trying to scare you. There are elements that have been scary in other forms of media, but that doesn't mean a damn thing when Frankenstein's fucking naked. Here we have Splatterhouse, a game so controversial, so horrifying, they specify no pussies allowed.
Oh, my kryptonite.
But you get into the game and like, yeah, it's grotesque, it's violent, but so is the 5 o'clock news. Really makes you think, doesn't it? If Splatterhouse is a horror game, then Mortal Kombat is. It's not enough to have grotesque imagery to be classified as horror, because if that's all it takes, thank God I'm validated. By the early 90s, if you wanted the scariest gaming experience of them all, you had 3D Monster Maze from 1981 and shit in your pants. But I think the definitive introduction of the horror genre was in 1992 with the release of Alone in the Dark. This stinks. Really impactful stuff right here, no doubt about that. You can say the same about World War II, so like, what? Alone in the Dark feels as if it was designed to invoke the feeling of being, well, alone in the dark. Hopeless, scared, fumbling around because the controls are fucking dog shit. Doesn't matter that, categorically, you are not alone, you're not in the dark. Because it's how the game makes you, the player, feel, which to me is the definition of a horror game. Now, how much of that was intentional? Who knows? You could argue the game's god-awful of two stupid-ass controls are meant to make you feel weak and powerless, or this was just the best they could do at the time. This is rough. I mean, you can respect Alone in the Dark, but you can't play it. However, it's pretty blatantly obvious that, at its core, this is something special. Up to this point, video games were mostly power fantasies, but here, you have one that goes against all of that. Every corner of this giant maze of a mansion has monsters jumping out at you when you least expect it, hidden traps that cause an immediate game over, cryptic puzzles, and an incredibly limited inventory of items to work with. And what can you do about it?
That.
The limitations may be frustrating, but horror isn't supposed to be a comfortable experience. Your vulnerability enhances the scariness. Nothing feels good here, but that's the point. Problem is, I think they laid it on too thick. This just isn't great to play. Admirable as all hell, though. I mean, the use of 3D character models alone here was revolutionary. No, I'm serious. And the fact you were moving around in 3D gave you a whole new dimension of ways to get spooked. This was a landmark title, defined the genre known as survival horror, and deserves to be immortalized as one of the all-time greats.
You know, you don't have to try to convince me that you're fucking crazy.
For how innovative Alone in the Dark was, its legacy really doesn't reflect that. It pretty much set the groundwork for survival horror, and didn't know what the hell to do after the fact. Oh, no kidding. But hey, credit where credit's due, we wouldn't have much better survival horror games without this. 1996, Resident Evil launched, and damn it, thank God for plagiarism. This is like the exact same setup as Alone in the Dark, and it's nearly as god-awful to play. Both games use tank controls, which mean
Just let me say they suck.
they suck. Regardless of where your character is facing, up is always move forward, down is always go backward. And when there's all these fixed camera angles that constantly change up your position, it just puts me in some sort of mood. Tank controls were a product of the time. That's just how you made games like this back then. But some will still go to bat for them, especially in the survival horror genre. I mean, imagine if you were in this position in real life, right next to somebody that wants you gone. You'd probably fumble around just like this. You'd be mortified.
You don't look mortified.
I definitely agree with and understand the concept that tank controls can help make things more tense and thus enhance the horror. Now in practice, man, I look more constipated than scared. For me personally, these old ass tank controls take me out of the experience. They overpower everything else going on in the game. When I'm playing classic Resident Evil, I'm not worried about what's around the corner. I'm worried if I can even fucking get there. But hey, that's just me. Wrong. Because Resident Evil is like the horror video game. Really like the first one to matter. The controls and fixed camera angles may be jarring today, but back then, this was the way to execute fear in gaming. I mean, you can't move the camera to get a quick peek at what's over there. The only way to know is to suck it up, be the anti-bitch, and hit down. Up, okay. Really effectively translates the feeling of dread you have tiptoeing around an old, spooky, dark house, especially with limited resources to take down the zombies you come across. Finding ammo is a godsend, but it goes quick. And here, saving your game is a luxury, not a right. You have to find typewriters to save, and even then, you gotta find ink ribbons to use the typewriters to save. And there's only so many you can possibly find in the game, so if you save too much, you're out of luck. You can't save your game anymore. Oh man, so good! The voice acting is...
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Well, that fucking sucks.
Damn it, man. I was trying to keep this going on longer.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be real with you. Resident Evil on the original PlayStation isn't the... It's not the... I don't like it. Doesn't make it a bad game. No, not at all. This is one of the all-time greats. I just don't want to play it at all. This isn't fun. But once again, that's kind of the point here. Resident Evil's MO isn't to give you a good time. Its goal is to make you damn uncomfortable. And that's that's what makes for good horror. Or whatever the hell this is. The scariest thing to me about Resident Evil is having to play more of it. Damn it! Well, just because I dislike playing the original Resident Evil doesn't mean I don't respect the hell out of it in the following entries. Especially Resident Evil 2. I mean, this was a massive upgrade in nearly every way. Just a much tighter experience. Hell, I even find the tank controls to be far more manageable here.
But you're sobbing.
You're less than I was before! I feel RE2 perfectly balances fear with just delicious ham. See, I believe Resident Evil is meant to be scary and not taken seriously at the exact same time. I mean, this first game, like, look at this. This isn't scary, this is sassy. And like, what am I supposed to get from this live action opening? Empathy?
Here you go.
The original Resident Evil's tone is iconically campy, and I love that about it. But I don't think that was ever intentional, and coupled with everything else, it just doesn't do much for me as a survival horror game these days. Resident Evil 2, on the other hand, honestly felt creepier, more tense, more deliberate in its design, all while keeping that patented Resident Evil stupid fucking bullshit alive and well. You can patent anything. But man, as much as I love elements from all of these games, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a hard time getting through them. You have to be so damn patient to put up with these things sometimes. Hell, learning the controls alone is a huge commitment. But hey, many will say the controls aren't outdated, you just have to put some time into learning them. How sad it is modern gamers aren't willing to put up with tank controls anymore.
What a joke. Next they'll want clean water, and then the right to vote.
Well, what you don't consider to be outdated, I don't consider to be worth my time. And before you consider that an insult to Resident Evil, it's not. Resident Evil's success proved that there was a market for gamers proclaiming, who needs a toilet when my pants are right here? So throughout the PlayStation 1 era, we got loads of new spooky franchises. Most notably, Silent Hill. Wow, now this is a new take on a horror game. I can actually fucking control it.
Yeah!
Am I dreaming?
Nope.
Silent Hill still uses tank controls, but with its more traditional third-person camera system, it's not only far easier to play these days, it's damn impressive. Like, check these angles. This is so cinematic. Hell, I'd go as far to say Silent Hill was even more revolutionary for the horror genre than Resident Evil was. And that's because Silent Hill is actually scary. Resident Evil can be tense and creepy, but the fear it instills basically ends at, I hope that monster doesn't look uglier than the last. By comparison, Silent Hill is described more so as psychological horror. It goes far deeper than, oh my god, that better not be a zombie.
I'm not scared. I'm just pissed.
Now, I think the Resident Evil games are better, well, games. These are full-blown adventure games. You can take the horror element out and they'd still be pretty damn good. Silent Hill is horror through and through. The game itself is solid, but I can't imagine it as anything but a horror game. There's just this overwhelming sense of dread. The atmosphere here is truly unlike anything else at the time. Even if nothing is going on, you just feel bad.
Oh, that might be why.
Fog so thick you can barely see anything. Your radio will make such unnerving sounds alerting you that enemies are nearby. And when you do see enemies, they look fucking nasty. Silent Hill thrives on disturbing the player. Not just with what's on screen, but what isn't. Just makes you uneasy the whole way through. And I think when it comes to truly being a horror video game from top to bottom, Silent Hill is a masterclass example of that. Dinosaurs and clocks.
Go on.
We have games like Dino Crisis, made by the same people as Resident Evil, except now, instead of zombies, there's a crisis. And then there's Clock Tower, which actually made its debut a full year before Resident Evil, exclusively in Japan on the Super Famicom. Alone in the Dark and this game right here can be considered the true origins of horror in gaming.
It's also the origin of all this apathy.
Clock Tower can be pretty impressive. I mean, a Super Nintendo game being scary? I mean, it's not impossible, but damn. There are a few key moments here that genuinely made me jump. But who the hell cares? Jump scares are like the fart jokes of horror. Nothing to be proud of here. All you did was, oh! There is this arcade game, Sinistar, from 1982, which is often credited as the first game to feature a jump scare.
Where I live.
Yep, there it is.
Which I do have a foolproof method to get around jump scares without obviously looking away. Just shift your eyes to the corner of the room while keeping your face pointed towards the screen. Oh, and wear this shirt. And hey, that is damn good advice to take moving into the PlayStation 2 era, because I'd consider this to be the golden age of horror games. I mean, buddy, look at all these. Brand new franchises, sequels, remakes. A Resident Evil remake for GameCube. Just 6 years after the original's debut. And my lord, these look a lifetime apart. Goes down in history as one of the greatest remakes of all time because it's more than just a remake. It's pretty much like a do-over. This just feels right. It brings the original way up to code, fixing and adding so much, it's practically a new game. Practically.
Oh my god.
The tone here has seen a huge overhaul. Now sure, I mean, this is...
It's me, Chris.
Is that you, Rebecca?
fucking terrifying, but the remake's graphical upgrade does numbers to the atmosphere. Many areas look so dirty, as if they've been left to rot, something bad happened here, or both. But even the clean rooms creep me out. The gameplay is still classic Resident Evil, but with so many tweaks, additions, enhancements, the map is bigger, new enemies were added, the solutions to puzzles have changed, which is sure to freak out veterans.
They may have served our country, but sometimes that's not enough.
In addition, the voice acting is no longer really fucking bad. It's just bad. All adds up to Resident Evil Remake being the definitive classic Resident Evil game. Definitely way scarier than the PS1 games while retaining what makes the franchise special. And stupid. But hey, it's good to play into what made your series special, especially when there was so much competition this generation, on the same console no less. Here we have Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem, published by, oh, I know them, Donkey Konga, right? And Donkey Konga 2, the very first M-rated game released by Nintendo. That's cute, and it just so happens to be one of the most effective horror releases of all time. Adorable. Eternal Darkness utilizes sanity effects, which break the fourth wall with elements that are meant to scare the player outside of what's going on in the actual game. The TV's volume changing, everything going black, error messages, all meant to make the player feel like they are genuinely going insane. Which has definitely been a theme explored by games prior, but not to this level. Obviously, some of these effects are fairly outdated now, and you can almost immediately tell they're just the game goofing around on ya. And honestly, at this point, if you're going to play Eternal Darkness, why the hell are you doing that if you don't already know about some of the effects? Eternal Darkness sales bombed though, probably due to the GameCube's target demographic shitting their pants for different reasons. Hell, even Resident Evil didn't fare too well on the console. I guess most horror fans were spending their time on the other platforms with games like Fatal Frame, based on a true story.
Watergate?
Fatal Frame is quite possibly one of the most unique horror game franchises out there, considering the genre is survival horror, photography. It's about damn time. What's next? I've always respected Fatal Frame, but never really gelled with it. I don't know, something about the gameplay never really hooked me, and its scare tactics just don't do much for me.
I'm pissing myself out of convenience, not fear.
And why settle for Fatal Frame 1, especially when there were so many other options available this generation? My god! I mean, for starters, the other Fatal Frames are far better. The Silent Hill series experienced a renaissance on PS2. Siren, Clock Tower 3, Obscure, Haunting Ground, Ruler Rose, QAnon. Hell, Doom 3 was a survival horror game. You take one of the most iconic video game franchises out there and make the third entry scary? That is so brave. And so am I for saying that's so dumb. Doom was all about action, brute forcing your way through all enemies like a badass, just a terrible one. Though Doom 3 doesn't necessarily take that feeling away from the player. I think at this point in gaming history, horror has been proven to be one of the most effective uses of the medium. It engages the player unlike anything else, immersing you in its world. So to truly take Doom to the next level for a new generation, yeah, it kind of makes sense to make it scary. I mean, you're fighting demons, man. Don't act like you're so damn cool you wouldn't freak the fuck out if this was in real life. Hell, I'd freak out if Zoop was real. While I do think the following entry, Doom in 2016, is far more true to what a modern-day Doom should be, that shouldn't undermine Doom 3 as an experience. I think it's still a solid game, one that took the franchise in an interesting direction that does make sense, while also showcasing just how popular horror was in the mid-2000s. I think this generation was a perfect storm for the genre. The PS1 era already proved it had so much potential, but now, you could expand upon the ideas and concepts introduced with far better graphics, sound, control, overall immersion, and with horror movies hitting it big, it's completely fair to consider this to be the golden age. So what does that make what followed?
The Golden Shower.
2005, Resident Evil 4 released. And it was the greatest thing to happen to the genre, and the worst at the same time. I mean, this is one of the best games of all time. There ain't no getting around that. It was a complete reinvention of the series. No more fixed camera angles. It now follows everything we do. The camera is our bitch. The gameplay is far more focused on gunplay and action, with more traditional Resident Evil puzzles throughout, and my god, it is a masterclass of a video game. But is it a masterclass of survival horror? Resident Evil 4 does have tense moments, its setting is creepy, and it can be scary. But it's definitely far more comfortable to play than prior entries, both mentally and physically. The controls are far more modern than anything we've seen before in the series, but they can still be a little tricky to get a hold of. For example, you can't move while aiming, which seems like a limitation at first, but the entire game is designed around this, which, yeah, it can still be a struggle to get a handle on sometimes, but it's never that. You still get a hint of awkwardness to make enemy encounters just unnerving enough, and while you have more ammo and inventory space than ever before, they're just limited enough to make things tense. I think Resident Evil 4 is undoubtedly still a survival horror game, but you see the direction things are heading, right? A horror game with an emphasis on action and spectacle that received critical acclaim and commercial success? Well, surely that's what everybody wants now.
Not me. I want a game with X-ray vision that's top-down, first person with customization.
What?
You know, like skins.
We are now entering the era where this is considered horror. They're not wrong. The Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 generation was so damn rocky for horror. Some all-time grades here, no doubt about it. But there's a distinct lack of, never mind! Many of the most prominent horror franchises up to this point dipped in quality, disappeared, or just flat out lost the plot. Resident Evil 5 was good, but it cranked the action up so much that it barely resembled a survival horror game anymore. And Resident Evil 6 went even farther in that direction, which is crazy considering the box art here is the scariest of them all. Don't worry, all you have to do is try not to picture a giraffe face f***ing a worm.
Nah, sorry. That's a leech.
Silent Hill was all over the place this generation. Fatal Frame just refused to release in North America anymore. And hell, even horror franchises that debuted here, like Fear and Dead Space, kind of both petered out with every subsequent entry, eventually trading off a ton of the horror elements for more action. It's like, what, did everybody just want to be like a Call of Duty game now? Got to the point where people were hyping up Zombie U for the Wii U as a return to form for survival horror. If that form is dog shit, then sure. Definitely a cool idea having your inventory down on the Wii U gamepad, forcing you to look away from the TV, leaving yourself vulnerable to zombie attacks. But that's all it is. An idea. Like world peace is a great idea, so do it. I just don't find anything to really come together with this experience. It tried to fill the void of legitimate horror games at the time, but to me, it just came off as tacky and cheap. The scariest part about Zombie U is the scariest part of anything on this console. Horror games weren't extinct at this time, but they definitely weren't thriving like they were a generation or two ago. I feel that trends really altered the direction of many series like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Fear, Dead Space. Like, you see how good that their Call of Duty is doing? Obviously, our series with the Jill sandwich can do even better if we just focus on explosions and haircuts. I think the more action-focused approach seemed to be a safe bet to bring in wide audiences. But man, sometimes you just gotta focus on what makes your series special rather than worry about ways to bring in people who weren't fans to begin with. And I think this right here in 2014 proved how special horror games can be.
You know, bears, rats.
PT was originally a proof of concept released as a free game for PlayStation 4, meant to announce the upcoming reboot of Silent Hill, Silent Hills. This game supposedly has practically nothing to do with what Silent Hills would have been. Rather, it's meant to show what they were going for in terms of horror. Shit in my pants. PT is a heavily detailed yet simple game. Looping through the same hallway over and over again with differences beginning to pop up, tensions rising gradually to the point where every time the hallway is about to loop again, you start to feel more and more dread. Even a minor change that's not even inherently scary freaks me out here, because the game tells you nothing. It has you experience everything yourself. No cutscenes, tutorials, you piece together the story details, you figure out what's going on and what to do, and the game makes you feel like you are hopeless, alone, there's no escape, but the solution is so simple, it's just a hallway. I'll keep playing because Jesus! Everything comes together to craft the perfect horror experience. Damn, that is fucking scary. As tragic as Silent Hill's cancellation was, I do think this helped set things in motion for a brighter future, right alongside the independent horror game scene. Many of these smaller scale titles thrive on being slimmer experiences, as they're not bloated with the desire to appeal to mass markets. They are completely designed to be scary, many of them having a larger, disturbing story in the background, with little lore details sprinkled throughout, encouraging the player to speculate on what happened. How did things get this way? This all helped the survival horror genre to experience a complete resurgence. I mean, Resident Evil 7 completely took a page out of PT's playbook with the switch to a first-person perspective. And man, this is almost too similar. For a series with such a unique style and iconic characters, this change feels strange, but this is an excellent, well, I wouldn't say return to form because Resident Evil was never this scary, but this initiated a new wave of incredibly high-quality games in the franchise, like the Resident Evil 2 remake, which is probably my recommendation to anybody wanting a modern horror game. The Evil Within, Alien Isolation, Silent Hills return. And it feels damn good to see this genre playing into what makes it special rather than be something it's not. Well, damn, that wasn't too scary to get through. Never mind.
You know, I thought I was never the biggest fan of horror games, especially recently. I almost exclusively played colorful, innocent, prude, stupid Nintendo games to avoid the horrors of feeling anything other than content. But horror games honestly help me better understand myself and my emotions. It's good to be afraid sometimes, because that's what makes you human. And when you have control over what you're experiencing, it makes fear fun. Horror games help me see that it's less scary to face my fears rather than just avoid them entirely. And with my fear being fear, I just want to tell it to its face, hey y'all, Scott here, I'm not gonna let this scary bullshit like Dracula petrify me any longer. If anything, I welcome fear and will kick its ass. Jerry, I think I'm ready.
Are you? Are you ready to conquer your fear of fear? Are you ready to laugh in the face of ghouls? Are you ready to punch the spirit of Halloween in the f***ing face?
I'm ready. was charged with assault.